Hi, I am Dixie Thomas, and I'm going to give you some tips for success that will assist you in creating and grading assessment. But first, let's break the ice. So, when you hear the word green, what is the very first thing that comes to mind? Don't take time to think. What is the first thing that you think of? What did you think about first? So, now that you have thought about a word that means green to you, um, what does that word mean to you and why is it important? So go ahead and take a pause on this video and think about that, write it down. For me, I think of recycling and money when I hear the word green. They both pop up in my head simultaneously. They're both very important to me because recycling is important for the environment and it's important for my bank account. Okay, so let's move on. There are two types of assessments, summative and formative. A summative test helps the instructor assess their students, and a formative will let the student assess the format of the class and or the instructor. According to Spalding, summative exams are ethically fraught. We don't use the word fraught often in a day-to-day conversation, so I decided it would be a good idea to look it up. The Google definition of fraught is anxious, worried, upset, distraught. You get my drift. It's anxiety provoking. It's to think about to taking a test. It provokes anxiety. In other words, how do you write an ethical exam? We can think of an assessment as a two-way conversation. The instructor is telling individuals how they are doing in the class, and the class as a whole is telling the instructor how well they are teaching. So there are 5 principles when it comes to writing an assessment: practicality, reliability, validity, authenticity, and washback. Practicality is your test practical? Can it be completed in the time allotted for class? Reliability. Can the test be graded objectively? Will 2 different instructors give 2 different grades? Will grades reflect your mood? Validity. Does the exam accurately measure knowledge? Authenticity. Does the test assess the student's ability to perform in the real world? And washback. Does the test provide the possibility for the student and the instructor to improve the student's learning? So I found this photo in the book. It's on page 80 in How to Teach Adults. And I really like the photo a lot. I look at this photo and I think of creating and grading an assessment much like building a house. If there are missing pieces, there could be some big problems later down the road. I also took time to recreate the photo because our world needs more color. But think about what it takes to build a house. You have to lay your foundation. You have to pour your concrete. You have to build the bones of the house, right? Like, I'm not a builder, but there's bones, and then you got to put in the insulation, and so there are steps that you have to take to build a house. So you can think of that very similar as you would in teaching your students and then grading them. So validity. Validity, we're coming back to that because it's very important. It's an important pillar when it comes to creating and evaluating your exams. Spalding says it's the most important component. The test should be fair as in reasonable, fair is inconsistent. I also went and looked on the internet for other types of validity. We have content related, phase validity, construct validity, criterion related, the relationship to other measures, concurrent validity, does it relate to existing similar measure, predictive validity, does the test predict later performance on a related criterion? You want to test what you've taught. For example, if I'm teaching math, I might not grade so harshly on punctuation, spelling, and grammar. I want to evaluate mathematic concepts. Furthermore, I'd want to keep the word problems such that learners can read and comprehend them, as I'm assessing their math skills, not their reading skills. And how do we grade fairly? Students want and need to know how they're doing. They want to measure their own learning. You should decide the weight of the exam, decide the weight of the coursework, and decide the weight of class participation. Accountability. How do you stay accountable to yourself, to your students? Well, one good way, the best way, is a rubric. A rubric will keep you accountable, and it'll help you communicate clearly to your students what you're expecting of them, and it'll help you grade based on the student's work. A rubric should be clear communication of your priorities and expectations to your students. It will allow you to grade students based on their work and not whether you like them or not. And trust me, there will be students you don't like. Personalities are different, and that is okay. Some students will use the rubric to grade themselves prior to handing in work. This is something that I myself have always done. I like to know what to expect. Trust me, students will call you out if they do not believe their grade was fairly based on the rubric. I'd like to circle back to class participation for a moment. How do you put this on a rubric? I really don't have an answer for you. The book didn't have a great answer either. The book does suggest keeping it very low percentage since it's not easy to measure. And I second that. I taught high school chemistry, and looking back, I kind of regret giving students class participation because truly, how do you know if they're really participating? How can you tell if the student in the back who's always quiet is doing more work than the student in the front who's just always popping up their hand and asking some random question? Okay. So let's move back around and talk a little bit about formative assessment. Formative assessments are important, and they should be done more than once per term. The book provides some great questions to ask your learners. My favorite question is, what is one way I can improve the class for you? So just an FYI, this is out of chapter. Okay, I do have to go back and look. Chapter 5, Grading and Assessments. It starts on page 81. So within this chapter, you will find several different questions that you can ask your class in a formative assessment. And you can give them a scale, a 1 to 10 scale, with 10 being the most difficult, of questions like how interesting the class is, and what activities have been helpful. And again, like I said, my favorite is, what is one way that I can improve the class for you? You can find those questions on page 90. Now, there are many types of summative assessments, and a summative assessment is not easy to write. They're daunting, they're time-consuming, and you want to keep them fair. So the different types of questions are true, false, multiple choice, short answer, and essay. For the true false, you want to keep your sentences short and declarative. You want to avoid using words like usually, often, or similar words such as those. Keep the choices straightforward and make the correct answer clear. For your short answer questions, you want to be clear on your expectations. Do you expect your students to have proper punctuation and grammar? Try to make it simple. Let the students tell you what they've memorized during the term. Oh, sorry. And I said crap too. I apologize. I could have said worse words. Essay questions. These show a student's knowledge and understanding of what they've actually learned. They're difficult to craft and they're difficult to grade. Also, like as in with a short answer, you want to be clear about your expectations. Tell the students how long you expect an essay to be. Tell students how many sentences you expect to be in a paragraph and how many paragraphs you expect to be in an essay. Tell your students whether you want quality or quantity or both. Also, I personally always lean towards quality over quantity. Just to be straightforward, I can BS my way out of a lot of things, but if I truly understand something, you're going to get a very short, simple answer from me. And that's just me. Now, there are some good tips for writing summative essays, and you'll find them on page 93. A few of my favorite are that you should start writing early. Take the test yourself. If you take the test in 15 minutes, the students will probably take twice to 3 times as long. Prepare the students for what they can expect. So make sure you let them know if the test is going to be true, false, A, B, short answer, or essay, or a mixture of all. Now, test taking rules. So this one's pretty straightforward, or at least I think so. One teacher, well, the principal of my school when I taught at Santa Fe South in Oklahoma City, she always said if my students didn't learn it, it was my fault. And I still have a really hard time with that because I think they have to want to learn. And even though I was teaching high school, a lot of adults are still in the same mindset like that they were when they're in high school. High school kids, they are like adults in some ways. They want to know why. So I was teaching chemistry and they need to know, why do I need to know this? Why, what am I going to do with this in real life? So make those rules clear, make your expectations clear, and just let the students know what you expect of them. How will you measure your success? There are 2 important keys to being a successful instructor. Keep clear, measurable standards. Also, meaningful reflection and development. You can see more tips on page 98. And we used the Spalding book, Grading and Assessment, and How to Teach Adults. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment in the chat. Thank you.